Okay, so we'll take this item by roll call. Note that Councillor Alec Allison is in attendance. Councillor Robert Brown. Councillor Maureen Chalmers.
Yes, Chair.
Councillors Convery and Craig are present. Councillor Maureen Devlin. Councillor Joe Fagan.
I'm here. I'm here.
Thank you. Councillors Loudon and Ross are present. Councillor Jared Walk.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. I'll now pass you back to the chair for today's business.
Sorry, could you hear me there when I was speaking? Sorry, I'm having some issues here.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes,
Okay,
we hear
Councillor
you.
Fagan.
Hear me? Right, okay.
Fine. Okay, we'll start the meeting. Are there any declarations of interest? No. We'll go on to item 2, which is minutes of the previous meeting. Does any colleague have anything to raise from minutes of previous meeting? No, fine. We'll go on to item 3, which is local government benchmarking framework. And I would ask Tom to give us a report on this, please.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so I'll first outline the purpose of the report, and as the Chair said, it's the local government benchmarking framework results, in this case for 2019 to 20. This is a report we bring to you every year, so I know you're all very familiar with it. And as you know, because the report is really designed to help us improve and focus on best value, we tend to put that focus on those areas where there's been a decline in performance or where our performance is below the Scottish average. So it has a kind of unavoidable built-in negativity bias. But we also give you information as a key part of this document on what actions being taken to drive improvement in those service areas that are highlighted in the LGBF report. So I'm going to quickly skip through the background because you are familiar with it, but I would point out that the bullets at section 3, which is on page 7 of your papers, they list the service headings which cover a suite of indicators this year, and you'll notice it's been expanded to include some new indicators, in this case covering climate change and financial sustainability. Moving on to section 4, which starts on page 8 of your papers. In this we're offering some guidance on how the contents of the report should be interpreted. And it makes the point that the improvement service itself cautions against simple council against council comparisons, and instead says that the results of the LGBF should be used as a can opener, a phrase you've heard many times in this forum, to engender discussion about performance in each specific local context. Now we focus at 4.3 in the report on 3 points about this. Again, all of which members have heard us express before. The first of these points is that local policy decisions can impact on the results, especially where a council such as ours chooses to invest additional money in areas such as road maintenance or the schools estate. The second point being made there is that there continues to be a heavy reliance on the Scottish Household Survey for the many satisfaction measures in the LGBF. As you know, only a small number of South Lanarkshire residents will have been involved in that survey, and we have no idea how many of them, what proportion of them, have any experience of the services that they're being asked to comment on. And as you know, our own surveys of actual service users tend to rate our performance more highly. And lastly, of those points, while determined efforts are made across Scotland to get consistency in the results for the LGBF, it's inevitable there will be some differences from council to council in how indicators are measured. So taking all that together, I would just draw your attention to 4.4 in the report, which is on page 9 of your papers, which there it stresses the need to look individually at each service and each indicator to understand what performance measures actually mean. Moving on to section 5, I guess this is the meat of the report on page 9 of your papers. This notes starting point that Appendix 1 contains all our LGBF results. A full readout is there in Appendix 1. But as always, we provide a summary for you, and at Table 1 you'll see that. And it shows that of the 91 indicators for 2019-20, the Council's performance improved against 32 of them, remained the same against 1 and declined for 41. Now, at the time of issue, there were still 17 indicators for which information was not at that time available. Moving on to page 10 of your papers, the report notes that 36 of the indicators showed our performance better than the Scottish average, with 38 worse, and again the 17 indicators, same 17 indicators for which at that time no information was available. 5.5 in the report directs members to Appendix 2, and there we've provided for the second year details of our performance in relation to our family groups, and that's an added layer of scrutiny that we've been providing in line with one of the recommendations that we got from our best value audit. Section 6 provides information about how the data is being published, and it notes that the Improvement Service and its partners have been trying to tighten up the timescales this year, so the final data was released early in February. This helps, I think, explain in part at least the large number of indicators which had no information available at the time of release, but further data is being released as it becomes available, and it's being added at the same time onto the public information pages provided by the Improvement Service. And we follow exactly the same process. We're required by statute to publish our local data, and we did so with the initial release, and we're updating our own pages, performance pages, as more data comes in. Now, finally, at 6.4, the report notes some areas in which COVID has affected data collections in some service areas, and in particular in social care and education. So taking you back to the recommendations on section 2, or page 7 of your papers, these are to note the importance of viewing the results in the local context, to note the content itself, including the narrative and actions being taken against each measure, to note that we have fulfilled our statutory obligation and have published the data, and also note further actions being taken by the Improvement Service and by the LGBF board. Now, I'm happy to take any questions, but as usual, there are colleagues present who may be better placed if there are any specific questions about specific service areas. Back to you, Chair.
Thanks very much for that report, Tom. Do we have any further idea or any update on 6.1 on any of the items which we didn't have when this went to press?
Well, as I said earlier, the information is coming in bits and pieces. We did get a release, a further release of data on the 7th of May, and in that we got some 7 further indicators, and of those 5, our council was performing better than Scottish average, and 2 were performing worse than the Scottish average. There's still some more indicators to come.
Thanks, Tom. Can I open up to questions from colleagues? Are there any hands up? Yes, Alec, I think I see your hand.
Yeah, it's almost perverse. You almost want to see the red crosses in these to show that we're actually investing more in some services than the national average. But it's comparing apples and pears, because not all services are the same between councils. One of the things that's perhaps not specific here, but is highlighted in education, it suggests that although we are spending less on our secondary school education, that it's not affecting performance. Yet, if you look at the Times supplement league tables that come out earlier in the month, South Lanarkshire is steadily slipping down those league tables, particularly the schools that were doing better. Can I suggest that we're perhaps needing to ask education to look at that and to evaluate how we're going to stop that decline?
Yeah, we can certainly do that, Alec. I mean, I don't personally, I don't read the Times.
No, neither do I.
But secondly, I'm not even sure how they go about the accuracy of their documents. So, obviously, if we're going to look at that, we need to look at other factors involved. I think Tom's got his hand up, Tom.
There we go. Sorry, I was on mute there. Just to make maybe a side point, as a former education correspondent of the Scotsman, I can say that even then we didn't take league tables seriously when it came to exams. But I can almost hear colleagues in education esteem coming out of their ears as we even discuss the matter. I think it's a bit not entirely unlike some of these figures I've given you today. They should generate discussion. We should not take them necessarily as being exactly what they're presented to be, but they definitely should generate discussion.
I'll get Tony to get a copy of the Times. I see Katie's got her hand up.
Thanks, John. Yeah, I'm sure some of this is entirely predictable after what Tom just said there, but as a former teacher, I've got to say I don't hold a lot of sway with league tables for various reasons. Don't give a rounded picture of what's going on in a school, they're not measuring other positive destinations, and we know from previous reports how well the council is doing in terms of providing other positive destinations for our young people. Academic achievement isn't everything for everybody. There's also all sorts of complicating factors. If you look at East Wren as a sort of classic example, league tables start playing into house prices, and then they become self-fulfilling prophecies where you've got little bubbles yeah, trying to think of a polite way of saying that. I'll perhaps stop there. But yeah.
Okay, so and I see Des's got his hand up, probably now that he's managed to calm himself down enough to be able to speak. Des?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. You knew I couldn't help myself there. And I think Councillor Allison makes a very good point in the sense of it shines a spotlight on it. And one thing I would want to say to members is we're not complacent, but there's been a steady increase in actually achievement, if you look at that over time in terms of some of those achievements. And I think I would concur with the views around how you look at that. The one aspect which I would want to just add is what Tom was alluding to. You can have the league tables, but it never actually publishes the added value. And if you speak to our head teachers of secondary schools, they will say about these league tables, they do not add in the vocational qualifications and all the other achievements, if I can describe it like that, from other pupils, which is not captured in that data. So it's always worth remembering, and I do remember a head teacher telling me that quite forcibly around how he was number 3 in the league table, and yet the authority overhand wasn't. And that was because of additionality. But I do think Councillor Allison makes a point. You know, we aren't complacent about that. We continue to focus on the improvement for our young people, and the investment the council is making in that equity agenda to close the poverty gap is certainly a key priority within our resources plan. So thanks for that, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Des. Peter Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've read those that analysis in the Herald. I think it was the same analysis. And the deeper you dive into that, the more you find some huge anomalies. Schools which were in the top quartile dropping down to the 3rd or 4th quartile within a year, and vice versa. Obviously, I have an interest in one area in Larkhall Academy, and it jumped hugely up, and that's great. You know, it gives you a bit of a lift, but those sort of movements aren't reflective of what happens on the ground. So I don't know what's happened. Well, obviously COVID's happened, but the changes in the places are just, it's a joke, really. So I fail to take them seriously, although the idea of taking the importance of education, if I could put it that way, very highly is something I would agree with. Thanks, Chair.
Yes, thanks, Peter. I'll bring Alec back in. I mean, Alec's,
Yeah.
You're very right in being able to raise the subject, Alec. This is all about discussion and trying to raise standards throughout. So nobody's saying you're not right to raise the matter. Alec.
No, that was just, I was going on to say, I mean, I actually concur with what both Peter and Des were actually saying, but we do need to look at that because the figures are changing, and it's not just on the 1 year. There has been a steady change, and we need to evaluate whether that is what the reasoning behind that is. Is it along the lines of what Katie says, that we take a higher, what's the word I'm looking for, that we look more for a non-academic achievement as well, or is there something else? We need to be sure within ourselves, because when our better schools are reducing the percentage of pupils that are getting, is it 5 passes at the higher level, etc., however it's judged. We need to be clear as to why that's happening, and I don't think that is at the moment. There is also another issue that clouds this, and it is COVID, because these league tables were not done on an exam basis, and there is some indication that the schools that were performing better have perhaps been harder on their pupils.
Okay, I suppose what we're looking at is a rounded approach from everyone that's doing these tables, Alec, but I'm sure it's something that we'll look into as we go forward. I can't see anyone else's hand raised at this time, so I'm going to move the recommendations.
Great.
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you very much. Move on to item 4, which is Improvement Service Strategic Framework. And I would ask Neil to give us a report on this. Neil.
Thank you, Chair. So this report brings to you an overview of a document which the Improvement Service recently published at the end of 2020, and it was a 2-year strategic framework covering the period 2020 to 2022. So this report summarises that framework and notes areas where the work of the Improvement Service will be of interest to us moving forward. Section 4 of the report gives a bit of background to the Improvement Service itself. It's got 34 members, being the 32 local authorities, COSLA and Solace, and it's been on the ground since 2005. The Improvement Service positions itself, and indeed it is the go-to organisation in Scotland for local government improvement. And at 4.2, there's a list of its purposes. So the first 3 of them essentially are about improvement. So it's to provide leadership for improvement, to develop capability and capacity for improvement, and to deliver national improvement programmes. But they also provide research data and intelligence to inform policy making. They deliver national shared service applications, particularly around geospatial technology, and they also work to broker additional resources and develop relationships with other public sector partners. So as we all do when we put together documents of this sort, the Improvement Service did a pestle analysis, and so that is shown paragraph 4.3 in the detail in table 1. I don't think there'll be any huge surprises in there, but you'll see, for example, they mention financial challenges for local government, including financial impacts of the pandemic. And the pandemic also features in the social drivers, showing that there may well be widening inequalities as a result of the pandemic, and the post-COVID world will be different in terms of people's ability to access both services and the technology that might enable those services, and that's listed under the technological factors. And there's quite a few items there in terms of how the Improvement Service believes the post-COVID world will be different in terms of the way technology is used to enable services and enable people to access those services. Now, last but not least, going through this table, there are environmental concerns, including ambitious climate change targets, and also local authorities looking through an environmental and sustainability lens when they're looking at recovery and renewal. So 4.4, there's a list of what the strategic priorities that the Improvement Service have developed as a result of their look across the environment. So the first 2 strategic priorities are to do with supporting local government in relation to COVID. So the first is about supporting local government to live with COVID, and that's very much about understanding COVID and responding to the immediate effects and immediate aftermath of COVID. And then the second one is about supporting local government to rebuild and move forward. And so the Improvement Service sees itself having a role in helping that reconceptualisation of services and the redesign and reconfiguration of services in the post-COVID world. There's also supporting local government's contribution to the National Performance Framework. So that's covering really all of the national outcomes, and there's a lot of stuff squeezed under that priority for them. And then the last strategic priority is supporting local government, working with communities and partners to deliver place-based approaches. So as you know, planning for place and place-based strategy is an area that's developing rapidly, and a lot of different themes and strands of work are coming together really quite powerfully. So the Improvement Service has noted this, and they will be doing some work in this area. So section 5 turns to the Council's engagement with the Improvement Service, and we have, like most councils in Scotland, engaged regularly with the Improvement Service since its inception, both in terms of large national developments like the Public Service Improvement Framework and the LGBF, which we've just been talking about, but also calling upon their knowledge, expertise and support as and when required when we've had specific needs to do so. But as well as the specific practical support that the Improvement Service can offer, I think it's important to note, as 5.3 does, that the Improvement Service are becoming more central, I suppose, to the landscape in public sector landscape in Scotland by forming strategic alliances with different organisations, for example, COSLA, and very recently they signed a strategic alliance with the Accounts Commission to work with them very closely. So they're an important strategic partner in all of this. So turning to the future and work that the Council is interested in, Table 2 lists a number of possible areas of work where, as we move forward, we would be looking to see what the Improvement Service is doing and to learn from what they are bringing together across Scotland. And a few of them that I'll very quickly pick out for you, but won't go into in huge depth, is data collection, data dashboards and sector-wide intelligence. And so I think the LGBF is an example of that, but the Improvement Service is also bringing together a wide range of data and learning from across Scotland. That would be useful, I think, in terms of understanding what the impact of COVID has been and how we move forward from it. The next one, support for elected members, including online coaching and mentoring. I probably don't need to say any more about that in this forum, but clearly they see that the online support for elected member activities as being a pivotal part of local government functioning and scrutiny. I think the Improvement Service's work on service redesign and how you look at what stakeholders think about services and you analyse the data about your services is another key area that we are interested to learn from the Improvement Service and have their support for in future. And then finally in that table, I'll point out planning for place. Again, I think their work around looking at the social determinants of health and 20-minute neighbourhoods and community wealth building will all be of key interest to us going forward. So generally across the items in Table 2, it's a bit of a watching brief, waiting to see how the Improvement Service push forward some of these areas of work, but we will be keeping an eye on that and drawing upon it where necessary, and we will bring further reports to the forum as appropriate. So really, Chair, it's just to ask the forum to note the contents of the report. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Neil. Yeah, as Neil said, this is an item for noting, but quite happy to take any questions from colleagues that they may have on this item. Robert.
Yes, thanks very much. Apologies incidentally for coming in late. I mistook the time of the meeting this morning, so caught up in the middle of the last item. I wanted to ask, just in terms of the Improvement Service, presumably we can put stuff into its work programme, and I just wondered if the general area of the the streaming of council meetings, the opportunities that offered, that sort of thing, and indeed the community engagement element of things are areas in which we should perhaps be trying to press an interest there, because it does seem to me there's a number of lessons to be learned, particularly after COVID, on that whole area, where perhaps the corporate experience, if you like, across the council, 32 council authorities and the Improvement Services part in that might be a relevant consideration.
Yeah, but I'm sure that's actually being discussed at the COSLA boards at the present time. I tend to get in at the last minute, Robert, with being on the leaders meeting, but I know that it's certainly getting discussed between between leaders going forward, but I'd imagine there are members on here like Maureen, etc., who are on the boards at COSLA, and I'm sure that subject has been broached at this present time. Can I ask anybody else if they want to come in there? Maureen?
Just as you were saying, John, I think it's probably about 2.5, 3 years ago. I'm kind of maybe not quite right timing, but the Improvement Service were hugely supportive to us in doing some learning around about community planning, community empowerment legislation, and the support in getting us set up and running on our journey that we're on just now. So I know at various points different members of staff have been really helpful. In fact, at the Community Planning Partnerships Development session last week, again, the Improvement Service and particularly the alliance with Public Health Scotland has been really useful to us in taking forward our community wealth building, the place-based work that we're doing, and supporting officers like Neil and other officers across the council with helping us to develop our plans.
Robert, can I give you that assurance, Robert, that we'll make sure that that item's taken forward through some vehicle at COSLA to make sure that the IS have it on their agenda?
That's great. Thank you, John.
Okay. Anyone else got their hand up? No. Can we agree that the item be noted?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. There'll be no other urgent business. Can I thank everyone for their attendance today, and see you at the next meeting. Okay. Many thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
John, could I get a quick word with you after the meeting?